It's great for you, I'm guessing, to be able to have a film coming out during all this. I know theaters are struggling a little bit right now, but
Yeah, sure.
for you, it must be a
Yeah.
real pleasure to have something coming out at this time.
Yeah, I've been like in an like an editing room for the last 6 months, editing a movie, and so that's been okay. Yeah, there's some kind of compromises here and there, but that's been okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And then yeah, and then with this movie Wild Indian, I didn't really have to do much. It's kind of like a art house film, so they're not expecting you to, you don't think, not flying to Shanghai to do a premiere or anything.
yeah, and I read actually that you only, I think the whole film was shot in 17 days, and I know you have a relatively minor role in the film, but it must have been a
Yeah.
very quick turnaround for you.
Yeah. I mean, I was not so. I mean, I just wanted to be involved in the movie. I had read the script and I just wanted to see if I could help this fantastic writer and director Lyle get his movie financed and made. The fact that it only had 17 days means I probably failed on getting the financing part because we only had 17 days to shoot it, but succeeded on the made part because he got to do it. And I just thought it was, it's just amazing. I'm so your audience is international or mainly UK based?
Worldwide, really.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah,
Because the movie is, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be condescending. I all I meant to say is that the movie Wild Indian I think of as such a interesting kind of a capsule on American
yeah.
culture and on an American crisis. That's all. The only reason I was asking, and I was curious if it would resonate in the UK in the same way. But of course, your audience is international, and yeah, the movie speaks to a crisis in America.
Hmm.
It's the movie. Obviously, it's the writer and director is an indigenous filmmaker, and the two protagonists are indigenous actors, and the movie is about a kind of them trying to kind of run away from their past, not only their personal past, but run away from their cultural past to varying degrees of success.
Yeah, and
Yes.
well, it really is a film, as you said. Although we don't have here in the UK that indigenous side of things, as you mentioned, it is a film I think people can relate to because of the themes in it. So, when you read the script, what was it in particular that really attracted you to it and made this a story you wanted to be part of telling?
Well, you almost exclusively see indigenous characters in American movies as a kind of quiet reciter of wisdom, or as a metaphor for some abstract concept like land, and you so rarely see them as like protagonists in this dark way. I mean, if they're not playing the villain, they're playing this, unrealistic portrait of, kind of white gaze of wisdom. And so I thought this is a brilliant script, a really the anti-hero is a character that we are often seeing as a kind of a portrait of pity. I'm so sorry, I don't know if the internet cut out for a second. Did it?
Only ever so briefly. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think that might have been on my end, but I think it still caught what you were saying, luckily.
Okay, I'm so sorry too. So I just thought this is just something, and I mean, at the risk of sounding kind of petty, my wife and I both graduated with anthropology degrees in college, and so our favorite things are just kind of looking for if I can ever find a story about another culture or some insight into a culture that doesn't often get its story told, and what is more powerful than somebody from that culture telling their own story. And that's why this movie is so special, because it's an indigenous filmmaker making a kind of cynical, personal, and also sympathetic portrayal of how he views this crisis within his culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, talking of Lyle, I know you've worked over the course of your career with some of the all-time great filmmakers. And with this being his feature debut, is it important for you, do you find, that you do get to work with a variety of filmmakers, someone who is starting out, and you give them a chance, even if they aren't maybe as, trustworthy as a big name director, for example?
Yeah, I mean, well, no one else really could have written the script that Lyle wrote. It came from a place, Lyle still lives on a reservation in Minnesota that my wife and I visited last year, and he's writing something that is so specific to his mind. It's a kind of indictment of American crimes, as well as really kind of cynical and honest reflection of his own feelings, of his own shortcomings, and so no one else could have done that. And so in terms of the directing, he's interested in film, and so he wrote this as a screenplay as opposed to a book, and wanted it to see it turn into a movie. So you have to support that vision. He also is incredibly film savvy, and you don't have to spend more than 3 minutes with him to see that this is the medium that he feels very comfortable working in. And then the other thing is, he's not just a kind of first-time filmmaker. He, in addition to just being a first-time filmmaker, he's also unusual in that he's an Indigenous first-time filmmaker. And so here's somebody that not only hasn't made a movie, a feature movie at least, but also doesn't frequently get the opportunities to make movies. And so, in some ways, there's like, an even more, kind of overriding importance to supporting that voice.
Yeah, and I can imagine you must be able to relate to him in some ways as well. Obviously, he was making his feature film debut, and I know that you're wrapping up on making yours as well. So it must have been in hindsight, looking back, quite surreal, really, to be working with a first-time film director and then yourself going on to do that.
Yeah. He's just truly like far more talented than I am. He, has that understanding of how he had his understanding of mood and surreality and that I don't have. And so I was kind of like watching him constantly asking questions. I think he realized early on that I was either very annoying or about to make a movie, because I was just asking him why he was doing everything. And then I told him, I'm so sorry I'm asking. I'm very curious because I think you're very talented. I'm about to do this. And then he was just helpful to me in my editing process, because he's very astute and, gave me great notes ultimately.
Yeah, and do you find at this point in your career you are gravitated towards these more personal stories like this film? Because I know you've done the big $250 million blockbusters. So having got that in your rear view, do you find you are going towards films like this more that do have a message and maybe a little bit more to say than some of those bigger films sometimes do?
Yeah, I have done over the last like 12 years or something, I've written a play and performed the play in between these big movies. So it's always kind of given me a sense of grounding as like a performer. You want to have a sense of that you're like kind of doing, I don't know, something that feels like really substantive rather than like, running away from, an explosion or something. And I notice, all actors do that stuff where you kind of go a little nuts. And so for me, it's always been theater. And then with this, this did not take a lot of time for me, of course. So, it's just about, can I lend my name and whatever Rolodex I have to trying to help support it.
Yeah, and I know I mentioned you don't have the biggest of roles in the film, but that first scene between you and Michael, I thought was so interesting because it feels a lot like he's toying with you, your friends, but there's almost an element that he's toying with you and he's enjoying that your discomfort in that moment. And I was wondering what that was like on the day to film that, and the dynamic between you and Michael off camera as well.
Oh yeah, you're very sweet to pick up on that. Yeah, basically, yeah, he's like a guy who is Michael. That is a guy who's like both aspires to white culture and hates it, and is disgusted by it. It's both been like something that's taunted. It's been something that's taunted him. You see him as a kid, kind of like having a crush on this white girl and passing her on a bus as he drives to his reservation, and you just see like that he's kind of he aspires to white culture as much as he detests it. And I guess, in some ways that's him taunting me, is, him taunting his buddy at work is in a way, his version of this kind of, I would say like, micro revenge. My character is in some ways representative of the white culture as seen through this indigenous lens. Oftentimes you see indigenous characters in white protagonist movies, and they kind of come in and out, and they seem more representative of something than a real character. And in some ways, the white character that I portray is in some ways that purpose. That he seems kind of like everything's going well for him, and he represents something that seemingly happy-go-lucky. And it's through this indigenous lens that we understand how kind of how oppressive that could feel to Michael.
Yeah, and of course we mentioned the pandemic and theatres a little earlier, and like here in the UK, as I'm sure in the US, they're still struggling to bounce back, even with the big Marvel films that are coming out. But as a filmmaker yourself now, how do you feel about the rise of these streaming services and whether things go straight to streaming, they go to theatres? Are you keen to preserve that big screen experience for people, really?
Well, it's funny because I'm editing a movie now, and we have all of these, like it's being put out by this great studio, A24, which does amazing theatrical releases of very, unusual movies. And, so the post-production process involves a lot of, making sure it looks great on a big screen. And it's funny because that's the process that they've used forever, is just making sure this all looks good on a big screen. And just in the back of my mind, I just keep thinking, is this important? Is this important? Because I don't know how people are going to watch it. My movie is like a small personal kind of character movie. It's shot on film. It's shot on 16 millimeters, so it has an amazing look to it. But it's can be experienced in both ways with probably equal appreciation.
Yeah, and is there anything you can tell us about the film you've directed? Because I know you might not want to talk about it just yet, but I know a lot of people are also very excited to see what you've done there.
Oh, it's like the movie is like the expression of somebody who got very lucky. I just feel like so lucky. Yeah, I wrote this book for Audible, and it's like a kind of adaptation of part of that. And it stars Julianne Moore, and she's just absolutely divine in that she plays a character that's quite an unusual particular woman, and she's just fantastic. And then the other leading character is Finn Wolfhard, who's obviously very popular for Stranger Things, and he's just phenomenal in this. He's just he plays a young guy who has like a big fan base because he's a singer-songwriter, and Finn the actor also, I mean Finn the person, also has a huge fan base for. He's just a perfect in the role and just so wonderful. No, it's the movie is the product of a very lucky break for somebody, me.
Oh, I can't wait. And just on another note for a second, I know a role that's followed you for the past few years now is Lex Luthor. And obviously Zack Snyder's Justice League came out earlier this year, and we got to see a very slightly different take on that scene with Deathstroke. But do you view that as being a character that's behind you now, or do you think that you could return one day, or are you sort of moving on from that DC side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the last person to know the answer to that question, because I don't know how they make those decisions. I mean, my background is in theater, where like, you do a play 200 times and you feel like you're just getting the hang of it by the last, performance. And so I would love to play any character again, because you finally, after movie ends, all the actors turn to each other after movie ends usually and say, oh, now I finally understand what I'm doing. Now I understand what my purpose. So actors, at least in my experience, do like playing roles again, but that particular one is just not up to me.
Yeah,
I
it's a
suppose I could
shame.
do a one-man show somewhere, but no one would.
Well, I think I asked you a similar question 2 years ago, and I think you might have said the same sort of thing about a one-man show. And it is a shame that nothing's moved forward, because in that Snyder cut that came out earlier this year, it felt like it was teasing Lex for the Batman, obviously a film that now isn't happening with Ben Affleck. And it's a shame because it feels like there were big plans for him moving forward. But I guess it's just one of those things as an actor, I suppose.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. But also, I was not. If there were, I didn't know about them. Otherwise, I would have some great material, but I didn't know about it.
Oh, well, going back to this film, because this is obviously a very important film. And as you said, it tackles everything from, I think, masculinity to that intergenerational trauma. And there are so many themes here. But for you as an actor, which of those, I know I said when you first read the script, what resonated with you, but when you saw the finished product, and again, I don't want to spoil anything, but that ending is very powerful with how the story wraps up. What really stuck with you after you left the project?
Yeah, just the way that you can tell stories about individuals that can say something about the culture that they come from. So like it sounds kind of academic, but because my what I studied in college is anthropology, where you're kind of looking at individuals and trying to kind of, make assessments of a culture and how that individual fits into the culture, but also what that individual's life says about the culture. And in this movie, you have this guy kind of running away from a crime he committed and trying to assimilate into, Western white culture, and it's not going well. And you have this sense like that there's a crisis in the community of feeling both kind of marginalized on the one hand, and on the other hand, aspiring to assimilate. And that interesting crisis that this character is going through is representative of a crisis in a culture. And that's the most interesting thing for me. And that's why it's cool that it's a movie and not a play, because that means it could play everywhere, and that, it could play to people who, maybe this movie might have more resonance for than just the people who, are just in, in cities.
Yeah, and one final question for you. As we talked about, this is a very American film in some ways, but there definitely are those themes that will resonate with people. But what do you hope, having served as an executive producer on the film, what conversations do you hope people have after they leave the theater after watching it, and what's really going to make them think about?
Oh, well, thank you for asking that. That's really nice. I guess that, you have a greater sensitivity towards other people and other cultures. That's what I walked away with. I mean, the time I spent with Lyle, I spent just a day with him on his reservation up in Minnesota, but also, on set and with the actors, just gave me insight into a culture that I don't know enough about, that we live next door to here in America and don't know enough about. And so for me, it was an education. The movie is both an education as well as kind of a thrilling, dramatic ride, because it's a story, but also serves as a kind of education on a culture that is too frequently overlooked.
Oh, well, amazing. Well, thank you again, Jesse. It's been so great to catch up with you again to talk about
You too,
this
Josh.
one, because it's an awesome film. And thank you for answering those Lex Luthor questions, because I'm sure by now you're a little bit sick of being asked, but I just know it's fresh in everyone's mind.
No.
After that film came out earlier this year. So,
oh, no problem. Thank you so much.
People are loving your work all over again in that one, and I'm sure they'll love this film as well.
You're so sweet. Thank you, Josh. I hope you get some sleep. I'm sorry to keep you up so late.
My pleasure. Hope to speak to you again, Jesse. Thanks so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Have a great one.